My husband just called me from Miller Courts in Milwaukee and said that there's an active shooter on campus. I just wanted to make sure it was reported.
On February 26, 2020, gunman Anthony Farrell entered the Milwaukee Coors facility in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and killed 5 people and then killed himself. According to the Washington Post, current and former employees of the Molson Coors brewery here say there's a long-held culture of racism, including racist cartoons placed in workspaces, the N-word scrawled in break rooms and bathrooms, and nooses hung at the facility, one on Anthony Farrell's locker 5 years prior to the incident that occurred in 2020. I've chosen 5 different news articles with varying headlines to help display the difference in linguistics used by different news media outlets, along with Twitter and Facebook to help reiterate different points that I'm going to make. One article is from the Washington Post, news found on gunman's locker at Milwaukee Coors facility 5 years before deadly shooting. From the BBC News, 5 dead in Milwaukee shooting at Molson Coors Beer Company. CNN News, 5 people killed after worker opens fire at Molson Coors complex in Milwaukee. The gunman is also dead. NBC News, victim shooter in Molson Coors attack identified by Milwaukee police. Fox News, shooting at Molson Coors Milwaukee facility leaves 6 dead, including suspect, authorities say. With the difference in all these headlines, there are different words used like attack, noose, which helps entice racist issues, and different things like that. And these just go into the different topics we're going to talk about with Facebook, where Facebook is a lot more victim-oriented, whereas Twitter uses different things like helping to victimize the offender, which is a very valid argument with different racial tensions going on in this facility. So one thing I'd like to do is talk about how these different news articles vary and how before we get into the Facebook and Twitter research that I've done. And so one way the Washington Post varies and has individual characteristics from the rest of them is it kind of minimizes the racist factor, but it doesn't in a way, because while it minimizes it by saying it's why we have terminated people for behavior we believe is unacceptable and we have more work to do. Fostering an inclusive and welcoming workplace is something that each organization has to work towards each day. It also uses in the headline, it says that the noose was found on Anthony Farrell's locker. It also uses the N-word being scrawled across different parts of the building. And it says that employees would also describe this workplace where minority workers were subject to racist language and taunts based on their religious beliefs. The BBC News mainly presents facts of the case, more unbiased. It does say that President Trump offered his condolences to the victims and families in Milwaukee and described the gunman as a wicked murderer. CNN also brings up Donald Trump's comment about the wicked murder choice. It says, "We are here at the scene of yet another American tragedy," which kind of plays hand in hand with the fact that I think 2019 had the most mass shootings on record, which helps to make media consumers believe that we are in this huge crime wave of mass shootings and mass media. And while it is an issue, chances are you're not going to have that happen to you specifically. NBC News is a lot about the victims, very victim-oriented. We are devastated by this senseless act of violence. Fox News uses the word rampage and says this is a tragic day for our city, a tragic day for our state, said by Mayor Barrett. They also share a tweet from Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin, who says gun violence has taken too many lives in Milwaukee and the mass shooting today is heartbreaking, which it is. So the sources do vary. They do have some similar qualities to them, bringing up different victim characteristics or different things said by Donald Trump, where it said that in like 3 out of the 5 articles I think that I chose. But they are individual in their own way, with the emphasis on the content they choose to display. Do they use quality research? Yes, because, in some of the articles they say, this was updated at this time, as they get facts of the case back in from different parts of their investigation, whether that be other news outlets or law enforcement agencies, whatever. And what, if any, is the role of scholarly research expert input? That goes hand in hand kind of with the symbiotic relationship between law enforcement and news media, because they work simultaneously together constantly to get this information out to the public. I'm sure initially they didn't say that there was a noose found on this man's locker, but it came out with different investigation going on which actually makes sense because that article from the Washington Post where they mentioned the noose hanging on the locker was actually presented in March of 2020 versus February when it happened, February 26th. And that was actually around the time coronavirus kind of really took off here in the United States. So as I was telling people that this was my project topic, a lot of people didn't really know anything about this case, or they may have heard about it and vaguely remembered it, or they didn't have any idea about it. And I think a lot of it goes with the fact that crime news is filler news. So therefore, if there's other topics to talk about, they're going to talk about that. And this kind of got swept under the rug in a way, which is a big one to get swept under the rug if it is, in fact, a case of racism. And when it comes to social media sources, they definitely vary. Twitter quickly takes the position that racism played a huge factor. It's very victim-oriented, but it also shows the offender, the shooter, in the victim category, saying that the racist issues at work created this tension and affected his mental health. Was the product of his mental health issues the creating of the mass shooting? Unclear of a true motive behind the shooter's actions, but can easily be supported by the racism theory. These are some of the tweets that I have found where it just supports the fact that people believe that racism played a huge issue in this, and that it could have been prevented had the company taken the right measurements to filter out that racist behavior and those quote-unquote bad apples versus just terminating the one, or there were obviously many more. When it comes to Facebook, many of the posts seem to be more facts of the case related or victim oriented, talking about it's a sad day and it's a tragedy for the loss of these 5 lives. There are a few posts that say that racism was not brought up, was not an issue, was not a factor in this shooting, versus Twitter, where it's a lot more outspoken and blunt, and it's a lot more media consumers who are tweeting their opinions and giving what they think they know is the reasoning behind the shooting, whereas Facebook just kind of brings in the parts from the article saying that racism was not a factor. Although there was a noose hung, the N-word scrawled about, racism was still not a factor. Kind of tries to minimize that aspect of the whole case itself, which could easily be the main point as to why this happened. When it comes to the academic peer review sources, it was hard to find articles that were solely about the Milwaukee Coors shooting. So I chose 3 that are about mass shootings in general. The first one is Why Have Public Mass Shootings Become More Deadly? Assessing how perpetrators' motives and methods have changed over time. One excerpt from their abstract is they often spend extended time planning their attacks and are increasingly likely to acquire powerful weapons and develop specific strategies to enhance their lethality. The second one, 211 people killed in mass shootings in 2019. The article offers information on 211 people who were killed in mass shootings in 2019. I know this case happened in 2020, but like I said previously, 2019 was, I think, the year on record with the most on record recorded mass shootings. And finally, disentangling the relationship between race and attitudes toward the police contact, perceptions and safety, and procedural justice. Although this one goes more hand in hand with law enforcement brutality on people of color, kind of goes with this one too, as race is an issue with a black man, and the chief of police is the one minimizing the fact that, or initially minimizes the fact that race played a factor. One excerpt from this abstract is, recent incidences involving police shootings of unarmed men of color have increased tensions between communities and police departments across the United States.